Hi, this is Eliza Inkberry with Darkside University Horticulture 101 Gothic Gardening, and this is the second week of class. We're going to be talking about the garden design principles of line, light, and pattern today. We're also going to be talking about soil a little bit, and we're going to talk about some plant profiles of plants to use in your Gothic garden. The syllabus is up online, so you can check that out. This is the soil food web, and I may have touched on this before, but I wanted to bring it up again because the soil is definitely the biggest thing that you have an impact on as a gardener. People think that as a gardener you're doing something to the plants, but you're definitely not. You are doing things to the soil, and then you're putting the plants in. And they're going to thrive in it if you've taken good care of it. So the two biggest players in the soil are kind of the tiniest things, and it's the fungi and the bacteria. And you don't have to read up on that, but I recommend it. And I'm going to talk about a book in a moment that is really slim and a quick read. But the main thing you need to know is to add copious amounts of organic matter. Anytime you have a black thumb, your soil is probably not black enough. So you just need to keep adding more organic matter, which is anything that used to be a living plant, animal, or fungi. So it's dead stuff. So add lots of death to your soil. And if it's already decomposed, you can mix it in, but I don't recommend it. I scoffed it because I'm from an area with really compacted red clay as the soil here, and when people started telling me about no-till gardening, I thought they were nuts. But then I did it by accident and realized that it's a very good thing, and now my tiller is rusted. So definitely, if it's already decomposed, you can mix it in, but you don't have to. And if it's not decomposed yet, you just want to put it on the soil surface. You don't want to mix it in because it can steal nitrogen from your plants, which is the nutrient they need the most. And they give, the soil organisms give it back toward the end of the process, but in the meantime, your plant's kind of starving and turning a little bit yellow. So these are some soil organisms. There's so many of them I couldn't possibly cover them all, but this is kind of one of the areas that I really love. So we've got some protozoa here, and they eat the fungi and the bacteria. So you have that the fungi and the bacteria, they're breaking stuff down first. They're breaking down the stuff that other things can't digest, as wood, and then the protozoa is eating them and using that energy. And then you have other organisms that are eating the protozoa. These are nematodes, and this is a potworm, the larger one here, and these are potworms. And they're eating various things. Some of the nematodes are not good. Fungi, actually, they form a beneficial relationship with most plant roots, and they're the reason that plants get fertility. That and some bacterias, but they're the reason that plants get fertility without someone going into our wild spaces of the world and adding fertilizer. Those plants are still growing, they're still doing really well, but nobody's using fertilizer that they bought at the store. And that's because the soil food web's intact, and those chemicals kill the soil food web, and then the plant's kind of dependent on us to add the chemicals. So with fungi, you can have, I've seen where they can make this little thread-like trap out of their mycelium, and then when this nematode kind of swims into it, because there's a thin skin of water on soil particles in healthy soil, so these are tiny enough to swim in that, and they swim into the little the fungal thread, and it snaps shut like a Venus flytrap and eats it. It's really cool. So the fungus basically chooses that it likes that plant. That plant is trading carbohydrates from the sun with it, and it's useful to it, so it wants to protect it, and it keeps away the things that would predate it. So then we have springtails here. That's another soil decomposing organism. These are both carrion beetles, but this one's being eaten by a fungus, which is really cool. And this is the larva for the carrion beetle. And then right here we have dung beetles, and they're scarabs, and this is one of the scarabs, and I've always seen these mites and thought that they were parasites, and maybe some of them are, but apparently the ones on these dung beetles are beneficial and kind of symbiotic and help them find and digest food. And then this is a soldier fly larva. They're a really great composter, and there are some really cool systems. If you look up black soldier fly larva, you can use them, especially if you have chickens or fish, and they decompose just about anything that was organic matter except for wood. And then you've got fruit flies, which not everybody's all that excited about, but this is one of their larvae, and they're really good outside in the compost because they break things down. And these are rove beetles. They're kind of predators, more top predators in the compost pile or wherever your soil food web is going. They're eating soft-bodied creatures, especially slugs and snails and cutworms. And there's some other ground beetles that do the same thing. There's tons of critters in the compost. Teeming with Microbes is the book I mentioned. It's by Jeff Lowenfels and Wayne Lewis. I recommend that a whole lot. Lasagna beds. So with lasagna beds, if you've ever heard about composting with browns and greens, which is basically carbon materials and nitrogen-based materials, you're going to have well, a lasagna bed is basically a soil building method for when you don't have great soil. And if you have weeds, you can put down the 2 to 3 layers of cardboard first, and that's going to block any weeds from coming through. If you only put a single layer of cardboard, make sure it overlaps. I tend to do at least a foot because I really don't like it when the weeds get through all my hard work. If I have a really persistent weed, I do more than one layer. Examples of that would be like English ivy, Bermuda grass. There's a ton. If you know it's something that you've had a problem pulling in your yard, then you're probably going to want to go with multiple layers. So then you have all these different layers of the browns and the greens you don't need as much of. So if you want to look up lasagna beds online, it'll give you the kind of exact ratios, but you don't need this to be exact. It can kind of just be thrown on, and you want to water each layer because your soil food web needs water to break things down. And if you want to plant in it the same day that you built it, you add if you're in California and your weather's mild, you could go with this 3 to 4 inches of topsoil. Where I live, it's very, very hot and things dry out quickly. So I double this, or I more than double this, and I do, even as much as a foot of soil would be great, but I do at least 7 to 8 inches of it, and I add another 1 to 2 inches of a hardwood mulch on top of that. But I plant in it the same day if I do these. So here's the cardboard layers, and they're throwing on the layers. But this cardboard is not put on so that it would keep weeds out all that well. You can see a crack right here and cracks right there. So, definitely layer that better if you actually don't want weeds to come through it. So garden design. I've actually split the main elements of garden design into smaller groups, and I'm going to cover a few of them in each lesson. So you don't have to do a detailed garden design plan like this unless you just feel the urge. You can definitely just walk out in the backyard or wherever and just kind of eyeball it, or you can draw with a pencil on a piece of notebook paper or whatever suits you. But we're going to start with line. And line is kind of the primary thing in a garden. Your eye is going to follow it. Some of them are very formal, some of them aren't. You can make lines with hardscaping, which is like stonework and pathway materials, or you can make it with plants. And so we've got two examples just on this page of like a very hard line and then kind of a softer line because the plants are kind of making that more like a flowing brook than a road. And so and then you get additional line with like these topiaries. So there's a lot of line going on here as an example. This is a less formal one, but it's still fairly formal. But you can see there's line with the plants kind of hanging over the path, but then there's a little bit of a hint of a harder line here. These plants kind of make a line this way. There's a little bit of a path here, and so on. And then you've got the fence line right there. This is a lot less formal, although these plants have still been pruned into very um, kind of manicured rounded shapes. But definitely this line here is really kind of flowing and not very hard at all. And so that's another example of a look you can go for. And there's no rule to that. It's whatever ends up looking aesthetic to you. You could like lay out your garden hose and plant along that, or lay your bricks along there or something. Um, so this is a smaller representation of line, and you can see there's kind of a line in here and through there, and this could be something that's at the end of a path, so it then also becomes a focal point, but it kind of flows into this hardscaping that's already here. And it also kind of reminded me in these rounded forms of the one we just looked at, especially because you have like the darker colors contrasting with it, and you have the same thing here. Um, so here's some very rigid hardscaping that ends up having kind of an informal planting inside it, but that's a whole lot of very aesthetic line. Um, and so here we have a space that's not as wide, but it's very defined where the lines are. And this is kind of an espalier. Looks like it could be gooseberries. I can't quite tell. And then I would probably fill in with some maybe taller spiky plants through here, like a lemongrass or something. Um, and so now we're getting, we still have some line here. I think every image I show you, you can find the line in it if you look. But now we're getting into light, which is one of the other elements. And in addition to siting your plants well so that they're getting the amount of light that they need, and you can check plant tags and stuff to figure that out. This is a garden that focuses heavily on plants that are going to be very muted and reflect moonlight well, a lot of silver, a lot of white, and even a little bit of pale yellow back here. And then, in thinking about light, lunaria is a really good example. These are the seed pods of the lunaria plant. It's got purple flowers, really pretty leaves, and it's something to keep in mind, because once it starts seeding, it's a very nice focal point in maybe a moon garden. Um, this is a way to use light if you are doing a moon garden that's kind of inexpensive or simple. Not a lot is required for this. You could probably even run these on solar and use low energy LEDs. But you wrap the trees in it, but you do need to make sure that whatever kind of tree you wrap, that you don't end up girdling it, which is when the tree outgrows the thing that's wrapping around it. And you may have seen vines girdling something, or someone tied a swing or a tree house or something, and the plant starts to grow around it until it chokes itself. So you'd need to unwrap these every once in a while. Alternately, you could use dead branches to do this with, and then plant things around it so that you wouldn't have to keep unwrapping it every few years to make sure it wasn't getting girdled. Here's some more moon plants, but we're actually getting more into pattern, which is the third element of garden design that I wanted to talk about. So we've done line and light, and now we're talking about pattern and light, because again, you have kind of these white moon plant flowers that would show up with the moonlight reflecting on it. But you also have the line in this creates a nice pattern, but you have the three squares with white things inside it. And I wanted to talk about how even if you have a plant that has kind of an unruly form that flops all over the place, the way to make it look intentional is to put it in some sort of geometric pattern. Impresses people. You can do something like this. Lettuce is going to stay pretty well behaved, but you can do it with even like peppers or something. Let's say you have a square bed and you just cut it in half diagonally, and you end up with 4 triangles. If you put in a triangle of peppers into a bed, it makes them look really intentional, even if they start to look kind of peppers are kind of notorious for not being the most attractive vegetable once they get going. If you're really careful and you're pruning them and you're taking good care of them, or if you've got hot peppers, which tend to have better form, you don't get as much of a problem. But especially the thick-walled peppers, they tend to look like a mess, and so that's a good strategy. But you can use different colors and stuff to kind of show off your pattern and make it even more apparent. And here's a very formal version of that. These lines are done in very strict rows, and so your eyes kind of carried around the circle both because of the path and the plants, but also the pattern. And here we go again with we've got a line, but we've also got some circular patterns showing over and over again in this garden. There's some artichokes here, and they have kind of a rounded shape to their foliage. Also very silvery, and depending on where you live, they're perennial. And you can get an annual version, but they're easier to do if you can grow them more than 1 year in a row. So now we're into plants. This is Spanish lavender. I like that it kind of has these weird ears coming off of it, and then the silver foliage is great for a moon garden. But I also wanted to highlight that there are different lavenders. This is Q red, it's Kew red, and it's a pretty weird kind of mutated looking lavender, but it would be nice in a goth garden, especially if you were focusing on reds. This is a good line plant. It's also a good pattern plant because it just automatically grows in a circle, and it's spicy globe basil. And globe basil in general, and it's called that because it grows in this circular pattern. And this wasn't pruned this way, this is just how it grows. And if you put a whole bunch of them in a row, you can make a nice tidy little hedge, like a boxwood hedge, only out of something edible. So that's a good line plant if you want to have kind of a structural element to your garden. It works well as an ornamental or as a food plant, and you can of course mix them. This is black mondo grass. It's one of the few black marketed plants that really is black. It grows a little bit slowly, but that's partly because it doesn't photosynthesize well. But it's good for patterns or line. You could definitely use it as an edging. You could make it into a border, but you can see here just space between white gravel. It makes a really nice pattern too. This is a rose, Cardinal de Richelieu or something along those lines. It's a French heirloom rose. It's a Gallica, which is just the type of rose it is, and it's one of the closest to actually purple that I've seen. You see purple roses in photographs and catalogs, and those have almost always been photoshopped a bit. But this one is actually the color you see in this photograph, and I know because I've got one sitting in a vase next to me, and the smell is just it's so nice. I can't even describe how wonderful it is. It's kind of a lemony, strong fragrance of rose, and it's used to make perfumes and stuff, and rose water. I highly recommend this one if you can get it. It does spread by suckers, which is nice if you want to give gifts to people, but we discovered the hard way it doesn't work that good in a stone wall because it will start to damage the wall after a while. So this is a couple of different David Austin roses, and he's a breeder of English roses, and I love his roses because they're bred for form and smell and disease resistance, which almost nobody bothers to do. Plus, you add to it the really kind of old-timey, antique, vintage element of having these cabbagey blooms instead of the really hyperbred tea roses or hybrid tea roses. So this one is William Shakespeare 2000, and it starts out as kind of a deep maroon, and then it starts to fade to purple. So that's a good choice, and it's a really well behaved rose for a red. The reds are a little bit more difficult than the pinks, but they're, that's a really good one. You don't have to spray it. It does really well. These are all David Austin roses. Some of these would be really nice in a moon garden. All of his roses smell amazing. I highly recommend those if you're in an area that can deal with that's not too cold, which is most of us, I think. But if you are in a colder area, here's Purple Pavement. It's a Rosa rugosa, and it also spreads by underground suckers, and it's pretty darn thorny. But it's a good pollinating rose. But the other nice thing about it is it gets these hips on it, and they're really big. That one's probably just shy of a golf ball size. I've seen these in person, and they're bloody red and shiny, and you can eat them. You can use them in rose hip jams and things like that. They're in, roses are in the apple family, or apples are in the rose family, depending on how you want to put it. Um, these are all flowering tobacco. It's a wonderful night plant. It reflects the moonlight. If you get a white one, there are some really lovely, like dark purples and stuff. But they also have a very, very good scent. And an interesting form on some of them too, depending on which species you get. So Nicotiana or flowering tobacco for those. Um, Here's an eggplant called Casper. It's ghostly, and the eggplant flowers I've always liked. They have these deep purple or light purple, depending on if it's a purple or a white eggplant. And the silvery foliage goes well patterned against things like lavender. So you space them out, but say you put maybe a darker green plant or a black plant in between this and some lavender, and it starts to draw your eye along the line and the pattern of that. Um, so this is Kamo eggplant. It's one of my favorites. It's from Kitazawa Seed Co. That's a really good source if you want to try that out. Round, very uniform, very tasty. You don't have to soak it to get it to not be bitter. And these are voodoo lilies, which are Amorphophallus. If you've never heard of them, I highly recommend Plant Delights Nursery. Completely weird stuff in this catalog. You will enjoy it. And so these are pollinated by flies because they smell like carrion. So they emit the scent of death. And so depending on how authentic you want to get with your night garden and it being kind of monstery, then this is the way to go. Amorphophallus titanum is the largest flower in the world, or inflorescence, and it looks similar to one of these, or maybe similar to this, but quite a bit larger. And every once in a while, Plant Delight sells them, I think. And theirs are all tissue propagated, which is nice because, oh, there it is, Amorphophallus titanum right here. And so, these are, depending on how rare they are, kind of pricey, but definitely a really cool specimen that your neighbors are probably not growing. Night phlox. This one's Midnight Candy, and it's available from Select Seeds. And I think a lot of different annual seed places sell these, and they smell really good. They're very pretty, and they're good to plant near a bench or a porch or somewhere that you're going to be sitting a lot. They're kind of small plants, so you don't want to put them somewhere that they're going to get bullied by other things. But it's an easy to grow annual and good for night gardens. And then I wanted to draw attention, now that I talked about Plant Delights, which is all perennials, to Annie's Annuals. And they also sell some perennials, but they have these nice lists where you could look up just maroon and black flowers, or just white flowers, or silver foliage for a moon garden. And then if you look over here at the totally useful plant lists, they have a lot of really good plant lists, but some of them are fragrant. So you can click on that, and it has a very large list of things that even if you can't see them, you will still be enjoying them. And they've included actually hardy kiwi on here, so I guess the flowers on that are what they're talking about. But it's always nice to have some edibles mixed in there. And that is our lesson for this week, and I hope to see you in our discussion.